Hi, so I often get asked why it is I don't work on batteries anymore. And when I get asked that question, I think to myself, really? Do you really think I don't work on batteries anymore, or do you think I don't do quite as many videos on batteries at the moment? Because not doing as many videos on it actually is a more accurate reflection. Because I'm a battery specialist. My whole life centres around batteries and the creation of batteries. Of course I work on batteries. But then I get asked, why do you do so many different things then? Why are your scope of interest so broad? And the answer really is specialisation. It is an essential thing, really. It's key to understanding something. But when you specialise, you have to be particularly careful of one thing, because specialisation has a nasty habit of narrowing your focus. And it narrows your focus down and down and down, until that's all you see. And the problem with just seeing within that narrow confines is, how do you see new things? Now, the guy who invented the molten lithium battery, genius fella. And when he put his team together, he only had one specification. Nobody on that team should have worked with batteries before. And this struck everybody as odd. Him, it made perfect sense. To me, it makes perfect sense. If your focus is so narrow, you will only see one way of doing things. And for you, that one way is the right way. And ergo, all other ways are wrong. And you see that so often, actually. I see that a lot in the comments as well, where people comment on something that I've been playing with, and they say, oh no, you don't want to do it like that. There's a huge joke here in England with a comedy programme where there was a character who always said, oh no, you don't want to do it like that. And it was a very funny thing, but you find that to be said all of the time. This comedian was making a caricature of things that we actually automatically do. When we focus on a specialisation, we think we're right. The consequences of that is thinking is everybody else is wrong. Now, I find that a really strange thing, but of course I meet it all of the time. When we did the thing on the generator, we were looking at wind turbines, I was told repeatedly that the only thing to do was have something with high torque. Some of our experiments where we used low torque fast speed on the rim show that to be just not true. But you get a lot of people telling you there's only one way to go. And that happens very much for people whose only focus is within the lines that they can see. So to my mind, specialisation is important. But so is broadening the scope of what you see. And you find invention happens when people have a broader scope. I'm quite a fan of a guy called Eric Drexler, who did a book called Engines of Creation. It's well worth reading, actually. And he was an early nanotechnologist. And his view of nanotechnology was that, yes, you needed separate specializations, but more important was the cross-fertilization of different ideas from different fields being brought to bear on that specific field. And I agree with that. I think it's really important to have a broad range of interests as well as a particular specialisation. So anybody who's only interested in one thing and only looks at that one thing, to my mind, is going to find it challenging to have new and creative ideas because there isn't any fertilisation within their scope of view. Doing that is really important. Now, I don't think it matters really what it is that you do. So we look at a whole host of things like woodworking, musical instruments, battery creation, generators, a whole host of things, because they all come to bear on what it is when you're thinking about your specialisation. So when I think about batteries, and I'm thinking about how I might go around constructing them or what materials I might use, then I'm pulling on fields from all over the place. So the woodwork, for instance, gives me an understanding of the wood and the cellular structure of different woods. I use that in battery and supercapacitor manufacture because I have an understanding of the nature of the woods. Now, I do a fair bit of pottery and sculpture, as you know, and I use that in battery making. I don't know if you remember the clay hydrogen generator we made. Where do you think those ideas come from? Is it possible I would have thought of using clay for hydrogen generation if I wasn't also a bit of an amateur potter? Probably not. So those things come into your field, but you'll never bring them into your field unless you have a broad scope view of lots of things. Now, I'm not an expert at most things, of course not. I bumble along, giving it a go and seeing what I can do. Quite Quite a lot of the videos we're actually learning together because I don't really know what it is that I'm doing. And I'll say things like, we're going to give it a go and see what happens. What I'm really telling you is I've never done this before. I'm doing it in front of the camera with you, and we'll see what happens. Now, a lot of those skills that you have from making something completely irrelevant come to bear on making the batteries and the supercapacitors. So, for example, we've done something like aluminium welding. Do you not think that that was immediately referential to tab welding and the construction of aluminium battery cases, or aluminium current collectors and their connection to the battery cases? Of course it was. But it's brought to bear. I didn't look at those things because I was thinking about them and how they related to batteries. I looked at those things because I'm interested in them, and it turns out they're relevant to batteries. And that's so often the way. Something you don't think is relevant actually can be stunningly relevant later. I mean, musical instruments and frequency of vibration is clearly very relevant to generation, energy scavenging and energy harvesting from things where we have moving traffic and vibration of bridges. Clearly. And yet you make a drum and people think, oh, you're making a drum, what use is that? I mean, if you're doing these things and you're thinking about things and you're thinking about the resonant chamber and all that sort of stuff, then sooner or later, experience that you have that you don't think is relevant actually is going to become relevant. And if you ignore those experiences because you don't think they're relevant, then you're not going to come to new realizations because you're just ignoring this whole section of your life. Now, my wife is American, and of course her father is an American, and when he first came to England, it was quite an eye-opener for him, because to him, everything we did was wrong. And it was wrong because it wasn't done in the way that he was used to. And he was caught in that same thing. If you're not doing it the way that I'm used to, the way that I think it should be done, it is wrong. And we see that all of the time. And like I say, I think that is also an error. I quite frequently say things, what do I know? I'm just a fat old man bumbling around in Kent. And that's perfectly true. That's exactly what I am. Just some fat old guy giving things a go. I don't know what I'm doing half the time. But I can bring those experiences to bear in my field of specialization, because my attempt is not to narrow the focus. And I would encourage everybody else not to narrow their focus. If you see something that you don't think is particularly interesting, it's well worth giving it a go, just to see. You might be right, it might not be interesting, it might not have relevance at that point, but it's quite astonishing how later it does come to have relevance in the stuff that you're doing. It's absolutely astonishing how that works out. It's not one of those things where you can predict what it's going to be, but it is one of those things that's an absolute truism that true inventive genius realize, and you can read that time and time again in people who have invented something, how they stepped out of the area of their specialization, how they brought to bear other areas on the field that they're working with, and it gave new realizations and new results and new inventions. So yes, we do a broad scope of things here on this channel for those reasons. And yes, I still work on batteries. I'm actually building 2 different batteries at the moment that I'm going to do videos on in the next coming days. But those batteries will bring together experiences that we've had in lots of the other videos. And I wanted to take the time to share that with you, because as I say, I think it's an important thing. So really, have a specialization. Absolutely, perfectly good thing to do. But keep a broad scope view as well, and look at things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily look at because you don't know what they're going to bring to bear. And please get out of your head that if it's not done your way, it's done the wrong way. That really is the death knell of any inventive idea. Anyway, I hope it was of interest to you, and thank you very much for watching.